I'd like to take just maybe a second and do a little more introduction about myself. Boy, I don't know how far back to go. Okay, I was born in Tooele, Utah, all right? But I never really lived there. I was an Air Force brat, and we moved around the world every 4 or 5 years. I graduated from high school in Texas, and 5 days after I was out of high school, I was in Uncle Sam's Army. Went off to the Fort Benning School for Boys, then the Fort Bragg School for Boys, and got accepted into graduate school in Vietnam. Did 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, and some of you may have even crossed that bridge yourself. Toward the end of my second tour, it was like praying on bended knee, pull me through this one, Lord, and I'm going to be good from now on, all right? I want to go back to Utah, the land of my birth, the land of my heritage. I want to make something of myself, huh? I want to go to college. And so I sent it off for all of the college catalogs in the state of Utah. They all came except Weber State College, now Weber State University up in Ogden. Just never heard from them. We were living in an abandoned rubber plantation in a place called Phu Phin, and the hooch that we had set up for ourselves got hit in the middle of the night with a 122 millimeter rocket, which is inaccurate but dangerous when it comes close. And we took a direct hit. In the world of close calls, it doesn't get any closer. The concussion actually blew the shirt right off my buddy, shredded his uniform. We both crawled out without a scratch, but I mean, you can hear anything, okay, but we were fine. And at first light, they sent in 3 Huey Slicks, 3 Huey helicopters with ammunition, food and water. And on that helicopter was one of those gray canvas mail bags. And in that mail bag was a college catalog to Weber State College. And I knew then that God wanted me to move to Ogden, okay? So I did. I have a degree in English and theater, and want to put my fine arts education to good work, so I hired on the police department. Was on OPD, street cop for about 3 years. I quit to teach school, junior high school. Lasted 1 season and went back on the police department because it was safer. You didn't have to face those little darlings unarmed day after day after day. Left the police department to go to work in emergency management, and I think I found my niche there. I really enjoy it. I've been involved at the local level, the state level, and now a state department level. And so that is what brings me to be here with you today. We're going to go through some things that have just kind of popped up over the years about how to get along with this line of work. We'll go right into the disclaimers. And I do this almost every time I do a presentation. First of all, they are basically BFOs, or blinding flashes of the obvious. I don't know how you are, but in the health department you have to invent 2 acronyms a year to be considered for a promotion. And so my winter acronym is BFO. It's just stuff that we've already known, and hopefully we'll put it in order and kind of help us get through. There are exceptions to everything. Inevitably, you go out and you do these little family and individual things in the community, and we're often noted for saying something like this. The propensity for cellular phones to not serve you well in a time of disaster is great. And inevitably, somebody will raise their hand and go, my cousin was in Hurricane Katrina, and their cell phone was the only thing that worked. I'm going, oh, fine. I'm happy for you. But that's the exception rather than the rule. And there's exceptions for almost everything that we're going to share here today. If I can manage to come here. Myths and rumors about emergency management that have just kind of sunk in over the years. Almost all of us at one time or another feel lonely in our job. I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard somebody say, and myself included, I don't know why I even bother. I don't know why I care. Nobody else seems to care. They give it a lot of lip service. They'll talk a good war, but when it comes time to have resources follow and help with the program, that becomes a little bit of a different story. So by the end of the little module today, hopefully we'll have figured out that you're not alone. Denial. People will say, hey, it won't happen. If it does happen, it won't happen here. If it does happen here, it won't happen to me. If it does happen here, does happen to me, it's not going to be that bad. If it does happen here, does happen to me, and it is that bad, well, we're all going to die anyway, so what's the use? You just make that big old circle right back to the beginning, and people aren't doing anything once again. Okay? Next, we'll handle it just like we always do. When I first went to work for Salt Lake City, I was just kind of buried alive and kind of went around to all of the departments and said, would you select someone to be your emergency management guru, and they will be on our city emergency preparedness team. Well, the cop sent this guy named Fulton, Scott Fulton was his name, and I spent some time on the other side of that badge, so I know exactly his MO when he was tapping me on the chest going, hey, Steve, look, we're cops. This is what we do. For us, it's just business as usual, but maybe more of it. Well, we sent this guy back to Emmitsburg to one of the emergency management courses, and he walked back different. It's not business as usual. All bets are off, okay? We'll figure that out. Other times, emergency managers are considered to be commanders or in charge. And in reality, that's not true either. We have chains of command for public safety responses in our communities, and just because there's a disaster, that doesn't change, okay? So we are basically a resource tool for those that are in charge. And then that last one, we already talked about, I guess, just as usual, just more of it. Another thing that we need to start being aware of in our line of work in emergency managers is we have oodles of wild cards. Here's some examples. Politicians or senior officials. These people, they're the same folks that are too busy to come to exercises, too busy to be involved in training, and yet they're in charge when the chips are down, okay? So it's a huge wild card. We never know how they're going to do. Some of you will remember years ago when the Winter Games were here in town. On Sunday night, I got a telephone call at about 10 p.m. From a person at State Emergency Management who said, Mike, I'm calling from the restroom at the airport. No one else knows this, but there was a positive reading on one of the anthrax detectors at the airport. Well, we expected that. We had planned. There was a high propensity for those machines to give false negatives. However, what we didn't plan on was that the governor just happened to be in the airport and said, basically, I'm the governor, I'm in charge, we'll do this, and it was everything exactly the opposite of what we had planned to do. Spontaneous public actions. That's another wild card that we need to put our fingers on and take the pulse of when the disaster occurs. Some of you will recall with me the really bad scene at Columbine High School. We actually watched that unfold on our TV. And one of the messages that went out to the public was, don't come to the school, stay away. And what happened? I mean, the people were like, there was a traffic jam trying to get to the school. So there's no way to second guess that. Kind of a little known story, and this just kind of was brought to my attention again a couple of nights ago. We're just kind of shooting the old Bravo Sierra about old things that happened and everything. Do any of you, some of you may remember Cokeville, Wyoming, where that lunatic went into the elementary school and basically incinerated himself. And well, that was a bad news all the way around. The rest of the story, a week before, I had been back in Emmitsburg with a woman that was the emergency manager. So she had been on duty 1 week when that Cokeville thing occurred. And we were talking to her about all the things that she did and didn't do and what she would do differently. And she shared that in this trying to give everybody a purpose and do something to make their lives worthwhile, she asked a church group, the Relief Society group up there, to start making bologna sandwiches and don't stop till I tell you. And she forgot to tell them. They actually had to have somebody drive to Salt Lake to get more bread and bologna. And when they walked in, there were like 50 stacks from floor to ceiling of sandwiches. Spontaneous public reactions. And the last is immediate attention. Would you agree that sometimes in our lives, when something terrible goes wrong, it's almost like it's management by news release? management by press release rather than the other way around. And as we start learning that and becoming wise to the fact that they're sharks, they'll eat whether we feed them or not, so what do we have to do? We have to feed them. Give them accurate, timely information as best you can. Years ago, on January 1st, actually it was the first day of the new year, the roof fell in at Harmon's Market up in Ogden. Okay, just came straight down, and happened New Year's Eve. Had it happened about 12 hours earlier, it would have really been either a mass death or mass casualty situation at best. As it was, the store was almost empty. There were a couple of injuries, but it was bad. I went rolling up there, not expecting to see it as bad as it was. Well, here you go, the rest of the story. 2 weeks before, Harmon's had experimented with selling horse meat, okay? Just genuine U.S. grade A horse meat, not clandestine. I mean, it was well marked and everything. And the newspaper, the Ogden Standard, had a holiday poking fun at Harmon's, trying to sell horse meat to the public. And so the manager of Harmon's basically said, and he had some expletives with decorum forbid that I'll share with you, he'll never talk to him again. So the Standard Examiner shows up, they've got a reporter on scene, he goes to try to find out information, everybody is forbidden to talk with him, there's absolutely no communication. Do you think, folks, for 30 seconds that reporter's going to go back to the paper and talk to the city editor and say, you know, sir, they didn't want to talk to us, so I guess we can't cover this story? No way. They are paid to get the story, aren't they? And they're going to do it. That reporter, incidentally, ended up talking to a reserve police officer whose job it was to keep cars from driving over the fire holes. And I would submit to you that that person may not have the classic overview of the entire situation, all right? It's like, well, I just happened to catch a glance, there's probably 100 dead people in there. And so the report came out, what, mass death and everything. Just nothing was right. So in our line of work, whether you want to or not, I'm saying stow the attitude. Understand that media relations, I mean, look, we handle our resources, we handle our budgets, all of things, so why don't we handle the media and the press? And I'd submit to you that nowadays, in today's world, with social media, we're going to be chasing them. The days of press releases and media conferences are just about gone forever, okay? So, fact of life, we're going to have it. All right, the emergency management facts of life. And it's not what you're thinking, okay? We'll fill what? All of these things. Doubtful, you're not really sure, okay? We are asked to make decisions with little information or ever-changing information. But we've got to do something. Overwhelmed, this is huge, there's no way we can deal with this. And then basically discouraged. I would submit to you that in most disasters, you're not the boss, okay? You're probably a very important tool and resource that may be holding things together. So what does that mean? Few of us have any legitimate authority in emergency management. I'm not in charge of anyone, really. I signed a couple of timesheets, but if you think I'm in charge of those people, guess again. They march to the beat of their own drummer, okay? Most of us are in that situation. So that means that we have to have our power base on knowledge, on expertise, all right? People have to believe that we know what we're talking about, that they can trust us, that they can depend on us. Integrity is the only thing that's not negotiable in our line of work. The temptation sometimes is to even make things seem worse than they are. So if people will move faster, pay more attention, just tell it straight, tell it like it is. We need to know our boundaries, who you should talk to, who you shouldn't, the protocols for your community, and every community is different. And then it's okay, I think, to bend the rules, but don't be reckless about it. Expect the unexpected, because things will unfold like you never thought they would. The situation is liable to be way different 12 hours from now. We have a huge customer base, which is, for a lot of folks in emergency management, that's really what we like about it. Our customer base is our bosses, in the community, in government, the community itself, other public safety folks, police and fire, citizens, and then all those people that sometimes slip through the cracks and get forgotten about. And inevitably, I can almost promise you that happens, they'll find them. We had the opportunity to go to Puerto Rico a little while back, and I was listening to this report on NPR, and they were going on and on about the thousands of people that FEMA had got them checked, started to get there on their feet, on, and then they said, quote, "But we found one person that FEMA forgot." And what would you guess becomes the story? That person that FEMA forgot. So it's to our advantage, I think, to not let that happen to us, to not fall through the cracks. Oh, problems that we all face. And this is kind of this laundry list sort of thing. You can all just kind of, everybody, I can see people going, "Oh yeah, hell, I know." I mean, they don't use the H word, but they're saying, "Oh, I remember that, I've been there." Turf wars, not sharing information. And I would submit to you that this not sharing information many, many times is not malicious. Does that make sense to you? Sometimes we just get so doggone busy that we think everybody knows what we know, and so we don't, I'd rather have people say to me, "Mike, why are you bothering me with this information?" as opposed to, "Why wasn't I told?" Okay? So that's maybe a good little thing that we can learn to live by, helpfully. It's not sometimes based on business, but rather political considerations. So we can't find champions. There are increasing retirements, or as I was, retirement? Who would have thought? Requirements, okay, that are coming our way, and we are limited on the resources to deal with them. In other words, somebody will leave, and so they'll divide up their chores among 3 or 4 people that may be around. There's probably not a person in this room that's wearing one hat anymore. Most of us have 2 or 3, which causes us to prioritize, which may not be a good thing to do. Keeping up with changing rules, things that maybe were okay 10 years ago aren't okay anymore. Never-ending political challenges. Would you agree with that? The political environment is something that we need to have a feeling for, get your finger on the pulse of that, and then live with it. No common vision. In other words, we don't all see things the same way. How many of you have heard the term of silos, that we operate in different silos? A friend of mine yesterday said, those are cylinders of enlightenment. Oh, well, we'll go with cylinders of enlightenment. Leadership void. Folks, here's kind of the brutal truth. We are pretty doggone good at turning out program managers. They do a good job of managing their programs, okay? But managing a program in emergency management is a big difference of being a leader. And one of the things that basically jumped out at us in Puerto Rico that was so huge and so overwhelming, in the military they would call it small unit tactics. In other words, it came down to the lowest common denominator, and leadership kind of bubbled up to the surface and literally carried the day. And we learned that some people who are really good at getting quarterly reports in on time have no business in making a command decision in a disaster situation. It's not viewed as an independent discipline. What I mean by that is almost everybody around us, their jobs are, in addition to being a fire chief or a sheriff's deputy or a public health, public safety person, and not just emergency management. It's changing. Emergency management now is becoming a career field. It's becoming recognized as such. The credibility has finally started flowing our way, but we've still got a long ways to go. Not enough resources, and we wear the same, too many hats. Okay, this is another plug for having good relationships with the media and good relationships on the social networks that we deal with, okay? Almost no matter what we do or how we do it will be misunderstood or perceived wrong unless we deal well with accurate information. So whether you did a good job or not kind of doesn't matter. What matters is how they chose to report it. When this one bubbled into my head was after the Northridge earthquake in California a long, long time ago. They had some Caltrans vehicles out there cleaning up an overpass, and I'm here to tell you they had this much to do with the overall response. But people couldn't say enough because they saw the Caltrans truck on TV cleaning up the mess, okay? So we want to learn to be facilitators in that. Next, in the real world of emergency management, we don't get a lot of attention until the consequences of not being prepared or not having a response are not good, okay? Years ago, there was a movie that made the rounds called Volcano. Tommy Lee Jones was the Mike Stever of Los Angeles. And I thought he did a good job. It was okay, But I took my kids to see it, and we came out, and my son said, "Dad, is that the way it really is?" And I said, "Yes, son, that's the way it really is." I spend the best part of every day with a child in each arm, dodging puddles of flaming lava. I do not return phone calls to the mayor or the chief because I'm just too damn busy. And if necessary, I'll blow up a building to change the flow of lava to the Great Salt Lake. Well, the cynical little brats didn't buy any of that, and probably so. I told them, in reality, kids, probably 30 to 90 days after our earthquake, your dad will be looking for a job, okay? Because heads will roll, right? Don't you think so? And I'm so far down on the food chain, I'm nearly plankton, so I fear that it may end up with me, okay? And so I'm taking home study courses in some different areas, but that's beyond this. Okay, unfunded or underfunded, and therefore what? Grant money drives the train. That's always been weird, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it, because if emergency management is important enough for our community to be dealing with, our community ought to be paying for it in one way or another. They pay for a fire department, a police department, snow fighters to clean the streets and everything, and yet if we didn't get grant money from FEMA through the state, we'd be out of luck. They'd just not have it. And so that's our life. And we have to learn to deal with that. Grant money is not the panacea, and I'm thinking it's terribly misunderstood. Would you remember after the World Trade Center, 9/11 and everything, I call it management by magazine article. The fire chief calls me in and says, "Look, I just read in Fire Chief magazine that Homeland Security is going to give 200 million people dollars and everything is going to be fine. Where's ours?" Well, sir, after you divide that up between 50 states and 6 U.S. territories, there's not going to be a whole lot. And I don't know how much we're going to end up with, but it's not what it seems to be. We're going to be struggling. And that means what? As emergency managers, it becomes our job to manage every dime well. Sometimes some of our more fortunate emergency management folks have a travel budget. And it's just kind of like, if I manage that properly, I can go to 2 conferences a year instead of 1. So it's my duty and to my benefit to be good emergency managers and manage that grant money wisely. Media coverage sometimes focuses and brings attention to our lives as emergency managers. Would you agree? Something terrible happens on TV, and what's the question that always pops in everybody's mind? What if it happened here? These are the same people that said it will never happen here. How many of you have watched reports of disasters, and they always seem to be interviewing a mayor or some big shot, and they say, what? I never thought it would happen here in our community. And look, our whole town has come apart around us. So that attention we ought to, I think, be piggybacking on to make our programs and bring attention to what we're doing. And then, of course, actual disasters and emergency response. And those are, there's formulas that go in to determine those things, but mostly a safe general rule is that there's more chores, more responsibilities, greater danger than we have resources to deal with it. okay? And it starts growing and getting beyond our ability. Then it falls into that disaster category. So consequently, in my opinion, now is the time for in-your-face emergency management. And when I was making this slide, the thought came, in-your-face emergency management sounds like you're some kind of activist or radical, and, maybe there's a time and a place for that. We don't want to be a pest. We don't want to alienate people, but I'm here. Veterans in the room will agree, I hope, if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. And so simply being there, simply participating is going to make your program very, very valuable. Some of you have CERT programs going in your community, CERT, not the breath mint, but the Community Emergency Response Team, okay? You can use that, you can capitalize on that for that in-your-face emergency management. Do an exercise maybe at City Hall on City Council night. Let them see that those little people running around with the green skid lid and the green vest and everything, they know what they're doing, okay? So you just kind of need to be creative with that in-your-face emergency management without making somebody angry or upset, but you should be able to do that, okay? One of the CERT exercises when I was with the city years ago, we had a CERT team in every city-owned building. And we did a big exercise in the City Hall, the castle down there at 4 South and State. Some people have mistaken it for the Mormon temple. And I'd answer a few questions and offer to marry them, but they said no. So anyway, we did our exercise, and we actually had our CERT team evacuating people. We were so under-equipped that we had to borrow backboards in order to get everybody out of the building. So they weren't even really ours. We just kind of bought them and borrowed them and put them under the steps. When it was over and that became known, we got the backboards. Okay, in-your-face emergency management. Challenges for local emergency management. Well, we ask a lot, okay? And mostly it's an obscure career field. It's becoming more popular and people are learning more about it, but for right now it's a little bit obscure. So we sometimes have turf wars between city, between county, even between departments. An example, years ago, when a hazmat response was becoming very popular, we kind of go through phases. When I first got involved with this, believe it or not, was in the end of the civil defense era. And we actually had classes, mandatory classes, on how to organize mass evacuations from a high populated area to low populated area when the attack was coming our way. A little war story that actually has no learning objective whatsoever. We were doing a class, and one of the classes had a block in it called Soviet Military Might. And it was done by the State Department. It was probably the most macho military, back in those days, videotape that you'd ever dreamed possible. I mean, really macho Russian music and paratroopers bailing out of planes and tanks going over hills and submarines like a porpoise coming out of the water. And it bothered me a little bit, so I decided I'm going to make an American version of this, okay? And so I did. And some of the music was Army airborne cadence when they run. Airborne, airborne all the way. Oh, kick Russian ass from here to the bar, all kinds of nice things like that. What I didn't know was right next door to our classroom was Meet the Russians Day. And they had come to inspect some things at Hercules and Salt Lake, and they were really big shots, and those Russians, you know how they are. They wouldn't make a complaint to anybody locally. They called their embassy in D.C. And their embassy called our State Department. And our State Department called the governor. And the governor called the Commissioner of Public Safety. And the Commissioner of Public Safety called our director. And like I said, remember Amoeba, way down on the food chain? It was Mike Stewart that had to go in and stand in front and say, well, yeah, I did. And maybe I did play it a little loud. I'll apologize, but the Russians were gone, so we all managed to live happily ever after, okay? Never any challenges and technical issues. Some of us here I'm still intimidated. I know I shouldn't be, but I'm still intimidated by technology, okay? Even Facebook sometimes I'm afraid of, okay? But that's the way life works. Most of us need to make that work for us. All right, enough said. Our challenges. We have a huge learning curve. Okay, a lot of times when people first start with emergency management, they give them this list of classes and home study and things that they really ought to know to get a handle on this. And it's big, okay? And especially if you're a part-time emergency manager, a half-time or even quarter-time, that gets a little bit intimidating. And then all the exercise and everything. So what's next? We feel buried alive by what we have to do, okay? Things start mushing and mingling together. You're not really sure if what you're doing is right. Sometimes we have lack of support from fire and police and even other government agencies, okay? They don't understand what we do. They don't want us in the way, and many times rightly so. The CERT teams in many communities really had to prove themselves, okay? The fire chief says, there's no way I want these people showing up on a 5-alarm, high-population, high structure fire. They don't belong there. That's not their job. And there were some problems, okay? And so they wanted to do away with the CERT program. And I said, well, how about we correct the problem and keep the program, okay? So it's a learning curve even on what we should and shouldn't be doing. Most management does not have any idea of the scope of what we do, okay? The fact that you're a planner, that you're an exercise design person, that you're a teacher, that you're a resourcer, that you're a combat commander at times, okay? A logistics expert, a volunteer expert. All of those things, those many hats that we have to wear, a lot of times they simply don't understand. I think sometimes our managers, they are these like really big shots, and they run off to the conferences in San Diego, and they spend the morning golfing, listen to a keynote speaker, and that's it. I wish they could go to the conferences that the emergency managers go to. We're actually going more until night, and sometimes meetings at night with other people around the country. This is the only chance you can get together. So they don't understand it, and that makes us sometimes the, I thought I deleted bastard, but I didn't. It makes us the stepchild. A lot of us we inherit programs that are antique, okay? That somebody wrote an emergency plan in the early 50s, and since then, that's all we've ever used. Have you ever had that experience? The first one I looked at actually had defense in depth, in case the Mexicans got upset with us and invaded across the border through Texas, how we were going to stop them in all these different areas. I thought, well, Colonel, I don't think that's going to be our real issue anymore, okay? I have heard it said, how many emergency managers in the state of Utah does it take to write a very good emergency operations plan? And my answer would be all of them. One to actually do the work, and the rest to say how they could have done it better as they white out your city and put in theirs. All hazards approach. Does that kind of make your blood run cold? When you see these little events like on TV, and there's this huge crowd that's gathered right next to the propane storage area, and we face that in some of our communities. It's never going to change. We just need to be prepared for it and understand that it is high hazard. And then, once again, no funding. So, what does that mean, folks? How do we measure excellence for ourselves? Because they say, well, if you don't have a disaster, you don't know. And I would guess there's an element of that, but for me, in my heart, all these things. That we don't give up. You hang in there, okay? You stay strong, stay true to the faith. Most people in our line of work are psychologically committed to what we do, okay? If you tied them up and sent them away, they'd get untied, sneak back, and take over right where they were. Effective systems, effective teams, effective processes, endurance. Have you ever heard this quote? If you've seen one disaster, you've seen one disaster. Okay? They're never the same. whether it's a little bitty wildfire that's burning out of the mountains into town, or some kind of bizarre spill. We've even had, over the years, suicide by nitrous oxide. And that complicates everything, including the recovery. So there's no way you can plan for that. So what do? We have teams, we have systems, we have protocols that we use, because when we approach disaster planning and emergency management from a functional approach, we have so much better luck, okay? There was a tornado that came right through Salt Lake City, August 11th, just after 1 o'clock. Some of you, younger folks don't know about such things. Okay, but it came right to the first calls that came into 911 was, there's a tornado on the west side of town and it's heading toward downtown. And the dispatcher said, look, 911 is for real emergencies, quit horsing around. And they said, no, really, it's a tornado. And the dispatcher said, well, okay, we'll send an officer over there to check it out for you. Came right through the middle of town. I happened to be in a meeting up at the State Office of Emergency Management, and all of a sudden, it reminded me of that Wizard of Oz movie where that witch is riding that bike, surrender, Dorothy, as she gets blown away, okay? There was debris flying past our window, perfectly parallel to the ground, and a lot of it. And the window started shaking in the window panes and the window seals. And so, like all true blue emergency managers, we jumped up and ran to the window so we could look out. And finally somebody yelled, take cover, take cover. And we did. The window never did get blown out, thank goodness. Jumped up, ran over, and tornado was not in my vocabulary. Picked up the phone, and it was dead. And so I ran out to the car and got on the radio to tell the dispatch, activate the Emergency Operations Center. And she said, how do I do that? And I thought, where the hell have I been for 5 years, okay? The little yellow book, the tiny little, oh yeah, okay, I remember. That's all it took, because, she was so overbooked at the time that we did that. We got the Emergency Operations Center up and going, okay, and got back down. Afterwards, people would ask me, so did you have tornado in your emergency plans? And, you just want to choke those kind of people, but the answer was no, we didn't have tornado. I didn't think we had them. That day, for the first several hours, I didn't know what the H had happened. I thought it was a wind shear or a microburst. I don't even know what those things are, but I know they're bad, okay? And so when it come to find out that this is a bona fide, in the record book, tornado, we did not have a plan for tornado. But we had a plan for mass casualties. And we had a plan for debris management. You see where I'm going with all of that as far as the function? Now, there are peculiar things in the bioterrorism world that require peculiar responses, but generally speaking, if you've got a snow team that fights snow and can clear those roads, then you also have a good set of emergency disaster removal. The roads don't cease to be main arteries simply because it's something besides snow. Okay, and you can use all. So you kind of need to be a little creative. Have you heard this in your long, colorful lives? People saying things like this: emergency plans are worthless because nobody knows what you're going to do. And when you have a disaster, they'll quote, who was it, MacArthur, American Caesar? Say, well, everything goes out the window and you just go back to. There are some elements of truth to that. However, I would propose to you that planning, emergency planning and disaster preparedness is hugely a moral obligation that we have. Think about it. No great sports team would ever take the field without a game plan. No great symphony would prepare to, give us a concert. Or no great theatrical company would without a script, okay? And then what else do they have? A coach. And they practice all the time. It doesn't mean that when our disaster occurs, everything will go exactly according to plan, but had we trained, had we followed the plan, had we had a good coach, and had we exercised, we're going to stand a lot better chance of meeting the needs of our community when the chips are really down. So it's not futile. It's not a waste of time. And those teams and the processes are going to help us. Okay, characteristics of emergency managers. Number one, I do believe you have to have a high tolerance for ambiguity, because we're kind of living that Chicken Little life. You know, the sky is falling, we're all going to die, but maybe not, and probably not, okay? So we need to have a feeling and accepting of ambiguity a little bit. I think it's also important that you just accept the fact that apathy of others is part of your job description, okay? It just won't happen here. Remember the little denial, hoop-de-doo. Okay, so they're going to be apathetic. We just need to accept that and drive on. Be a jack and a master of all trades. Now that's pretty intense to say you're master of all trades, but you can't just dabble in volunteer management. You've got to have a real good feeling for it. You can't just volunteer somebody to do an emergency management function for you. There was a career-ending Mike Stever comment to my boss when I told him he was out of touch with reality, okay? But they're saying you can use anybody you want to help you. And I said, well, a person who sits all day and draws posters that cancer will kill you and you need to stop smoking is not somebody you can just say, okay, run in there and write up the standard operating procedures for the operations center. There are certain skills. I mean, it's not a lot of rocket scientists, but we need to have good people, and you personally have to get a feeling for it. I often recommend and suggest to new people just starting out in the game, your training does not have to have the words emergency or disaster or public safety in front of it. Look for the core word like effective communication, okay? Managing multiple projects at once. That's an art form. So it doesn't have to be any disaster stuff to make it valuable to you. You just become a better leader, I think. We need to accept and even welcome change. And then, if you're ready for this, manage the change to our advantage, okay? Back in the fire service days, I do believe there were some chiefs that would have us wearing leather helmets still if we let them, okay? Because that's the way, real firemen go. We have to accept change, understand that's going to happen, and then embrace it and make it work for you. Self-actualized and have a thick skin. One of my favorite quotes from one of my comrades in arms, and we were both like rookies when he said this, thank goodness I'm self-actualized, or a mess like this could really upset me. And I thought, I'm going to live by that from now on. Realities. You seek people that are nourishing and encouraging. We all are psychologically committed to the same thing. And so seek relationships with people who care about you, not just who need you, okay? And I know this is getting kind of artsy or whatever, but I've got a slide later on, I'm going to say it right now. No technology will ever be able to replace interpersonal skills, communication skills. We need all those things, but basically interpersonal communication, honesty and integrity, and people that really give a rat's ass about what we're doing in life is where it's going to grow. A plan is no excuse for not thinking. We may have the Cracker Jack plan, and it may talk about tornadoes or, killer frogs or something like that, but it's never enough. We need to be creative and adjust, and when we do our exercises of those plans, it's okay to throw in maybe one or two surprises. Years ago, in a previous jurisdiction where I worked, there, every 3 years, did a full-scale exercise, and it was no exercise at all. It was a demonstration of their skills, okay? So we're going to put ourselves to the limit. Okay, understand roadblocks that are going to come our way, all of those. Develop your 5 senses, and when I put this in, people are going, oh, hearing and touch. No, I'm talking about these 5 senses of self, of adventure, of humor, a sense of romance, and a sense of duty, okay? We've got to do those things. Technology will never replace human dimensions. That last bottom one there, remember what's in it for me? We all want the same thing. And so if we can agree on that, a lot of times we're able to make peace and get things done early on. Things are worse, would you agree? And more rapid. Those people who study such things, they can document it. We have more disasters. They cost more. There's lots of reasons why, but it's a fact of life we need to deal with. So what's our advice? Hang on, don't give up. Build relationships, even if it's just one-sided, okay? Even if you feel like you're just giving, do it anyway, because you're going to need those folks somewhere down the line. Networking, political leaders, how they can help you, join organizations. Remember that very beginning slide we said, we feel alone sometimes, but we're not? Joining organizations like UEMA and Association of Strategic Planners and others is one of the keys for our success, because it allows you to recharge and keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening around the world. Okay, strategic alliances. Cultivate that before you need them. Learn to fake enthusiasm, okay? Sometimes, I'm not going to go there. That next one down. Start getting proficient to be a successful emergency manager about requesting missions rather than specific resources. What I mean by that is you may have to move 44 people from a convalescent center to another one across town, and so you put in a request for a 44-passenger bus. We don't have any buses, and it dies right there. So if you give them the mission, I need to move 44 people before supper, 25 miles, and some of them are going to be in wheelchairs, then we can make it happen. We might go to the airport and get those little tiny parking vehicles or something. So be good at that. And I don't have a slide for this, but remember SALT when you request things. Size, okay, amount, location, and time. When I first got to Puerto Rico a little while back, I walked in thinking, well, I'm Mr. Gift to Emergency Management here, and I'm very, very important, and I hope you all realize it. And they said, welcome, we're going to introduce you as the new Deputy Director for Generator Operations. And I thought, well, generator operations? And I almost wept, okay? It only took me about 20 minutes to realize that in an island with no power, generators are like gold. We even had one stolen. And I go, am I correct? This is an island, right? Okay, try to reinvent as little as possible. Don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out. Learn to triage information. Normally, we've got so much coming in that you can't absorb it all. After the great H1N1 non-disaster disaster, which I think turned out because of very good public health response, okay, somebody said, well, we were really critical of our health department because they just wouldn't give us anything. No information. And I said, gosh, I'm kind of surprised to hear that because we were criticized for pouring out too much information. Well, yeah, but you can't tell us what to do. So we'll let that end right there. Skill volunteers, interpreter. Don't be shy about asking for help and learn how to ask for help, okay? First glance checklists, sorry. That last bullet up there, learn to communicate even when there's nothing to say. Keep the channels open. Remember what we said earlier about just showing up is half the battle. Fly the flag, let them know you're here. None of us is smart as all of us. Never stand too close to people that are all bandaged up. That's just the general fact of life, okay? Be decisive. Hire for attitude, then teach the skills. I truly believe that even though we're peculiar and we have a lot of things that make us different from other folks and unique skills, it's not rocket science. So a person with a good, solid work ethic who may clean out the dressing room just because nobody else will do it is more valuable than somebody who knows, about the 3 parts of an emergency evacuation plan. It's okay to give up control, but retain power and responsibility. Learn skillful delegation. Be generous with praise. I really don't think we say thank you enough or you've done a good job enough. We just assume they're going to do it. I took that total quality and just kind of chopped off the last part of that. We need to be good at what we do and pay attention. The last thing my father said to me when I went to Vietnam, he said, son, when you get OCONUS, which means out of the country, he said, I want you to find the crustiest, meanest, orneriest sergeant major in the whole U.S. Army. And you grab a hold of his pant leg and you hang on to all, for all you're worth. Because that sergeant major is going to be the one that brings you home to us. What my dad was saying was, find a mentor. And by looking around at the folks in this room, you need to graduate and be a mentor. To help other people along, to make our career field all that it can be. And learn to run a good meeting. Would you agree that's important? I mean, bad meetings can aggravate the guts from an Iron Man, and we don't have time for it. Accept training, join associations, expert authority, document excessive. Real estate is what? Location, location, location. In emergency management, coordination, coordination, coordination. Be the best information sharers on the planet. Be the best interpreters of what you need and your peculiar way of getting things done, and you have to do all the time. What I mean by that, and I know I'm kind of maybe talking a little fast and going sometimes in circles, but even in learning about exercises and disaster drills, some people use the same terminology for everything. They don't get it. They don't know the difference between a tabletop or a functional or a drill. So many times, and one of my own pet peeves is they'll have some equipment and staffing that actually roll and do something, and they'll say, well, that's full scale because we're out of it. Well, it's not. It's a drill. Full scale is when the EOC is activated and the policy group shows up or at least gets briefed on what you're doing, and you coordinate with the next higher level of operation centers, and you bring the state folks into the fold, okay? So it's coordination, coordination, coordination. Each passing day brings us 24 hours closer to the next major disaster. Fini, I appreciate the time to share with you. I hope we do good. You deserve a gold score and a salute.
Excellent job, Mr. Mike Stever. Thank you very much. We actually have a few minutes. Anybody want to ask any questions of his expertise and experience? Many years under the belt there. Anybody have any questions for Mike?
Hey, Mike, what was the nugget that you picked up on your deployment?
Tomorrow, we're going to have a panel. We'll talk about that. For me, probably one of the most important things was, this is very dramatic, but it was business as usual, okay? And it reinforced all the stuff that we've kind of been taught about how to organize, how to go forth and do things. It was more the same. Plus little bitty things to answer kind of quickly. FEMA was not bashful about organizing, at least in my neck of the woods, task forces. Okay, they put them together almost on the fly to get things that needed to be done, and they fit into the ICS scheme of things. Did that make sense? They had a name, span of control, communications, all of that. So we'll go into a little bit more. When the winter games come, and this is a totally non-learning objective, my daughter wanted to go downtown and watch at the medals ceremony in the evening. And I was really gun-shy about that. I said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, that's just not going to happen." And she said, "Well, we're going to go to the bus and then catch the bus and ride it downtown." And I says, "Well, okay, if you wear my parka." And you remember everybody had their own parkas. Coca-Cola had a parka, Express had their parka and everything. So we had a little public safety sort of thing. I said, "Wear that. And also, sweetheart, I'm going to be watching you every moment you're in town because Salt Lake is covered with cameras. There's no corner that we can't look at from the operations center, so you behave. Call me when you get there. Well, as fate would have it, when she got there to make her call, I was not there. But a police sergeant was kind of taking calls in my position, and I had told him the story. And so when she called in, he said, "Oh, yeah, Suze, sorry your dad's just stepped away, but oh my goodness, I see you're wearing his jacket. I hope you have a good time." She didn't have any fun that night, but at least, you know, we can account for the little darling.
All right, that about wraps up our time. I think, again, one more round of applause for Mike Stever. Excellent presentation. Thanks for sharing all that wealth.